Hello, everyone. Welcome to the final project for the school year. I wanted to share it with you so that you understood it, and I wanted to talk you through it. So, just so we're clear, in my class, and I believe all economics classes, we have assigned a handful of assignments in quarter four. If you go into the grade book, everything that begins with Q4 is an assignment that you must complete. If you don't complete the assignment, then you'll get an incomplete. And how incompletes work at Summit High School, or traditionally they have when we didn't have pandemics occurring, is you get an incomplete. You have until the end of quarter one of the following year to make that up. Some people make the incomplete up over summer school. Some people make it up in Reach or Kukamu or some other class during first quarter of the next year. If you don't finish it by the end of the first quarter, traditionally what has happened is that incomplete has turned into a failure, and then you have to retake the class. So I just want to explain that up front. Now, there are three assignments that you need to have handed in. You need the supply and demand assessment, you need the six economic functions of government assessment, and you need to do the work on personal finance. The personal finance one is pieces. It's a couple different things. So while you might be hearing out there that your grade can't drop lower than your quarter three grade, that's totally true. However, if you don't complete quarter four work, then you're going to have to then you get an incomplete, and you're going to have to complete that at some point. Now, this project that I'm showing you right now is optional. This is a cool project we have done in the past. It's gotten better over the years, and it revolves around these podcasts. Um, Again, it's optional. You don't have to do it. What you will need to do if you decide to do it is go full on and complete it in full, and you get to choose which standards you want to address, which means you can improve particular standards. If you've got a 4 in 3.1, then maybe focus on these other ones. But you get to choose which standards. You need to tell me which standards you're going to choose. Okay, here's how it works. How I Built This is a podcast. It's done by NPR, National Public Radio, by a man named Guy Raz. And what he does is he interviews people who have created different products. Cotopaxi is a product here. They make backpacks. I believe they're even based out of Boulder. And the guy interviews all of these different people. There are How I Built This is on Southwest Airlines, on uh, Chuck E. Cheese, Alvin and the Chipmunks, um, Ben and Jerry's. I'll go through the list so that you can see some of them. But there are a lot of different ones on a lot of different topics. Sweet Green, Swell, um, Ben and Jerry's. We talked about Burton. There's a Burton one in here somewhere. Lululemon, Eventbrite, Instagram, Panera Bread. There are a whole bunch of different Wikipedia. That one was actually pretty interesting because no one's paid to contribute to Wikipedia. People just do it to be nice. Um, the point is that there are a lot of different interviews here in How I Built This, and what the guy does is he interviews the people who built these programs, Cliff Bar, Patagonia, um, and he says, "How did you do it?" And they find out the story. Mike's Killer Bread, that was an interesting one. Dell Computers, all sorts of things. But the point is that he interviews them. He explains the people explain their story, how they came to create whatever they created. Um, the kind of the journey and the process, and they're very interesting. They range from anywhere from 20 minutes to a full hour. Don't let the timing thing deter you because they are really interesting. Honest Tea is on there, Home Depot. um, oh shoot, there's another one you might like, Five Guys, the burger place. There are a whole bunch of different folks, but I'll post a list for you to be able to look and see those. The point is that you would choose one of these, How I Built These Podcasts. You would listen to it by clicking on it. Impossible Foods, this is the guy who's creating um,
Hey, it's Guy here, and before we start the show, I wanted to let you know about a short anonymous survey that slash podcast survey. And thanks.
Yeah.
We had half the company basically was to some extent going out to soybean farms for the better part of a year, and it was, in retrospect, a bad idea. But this is the kind of thing you have to do. You have to be not afraid to try things that may fail.
Yeah.
I can tell you for certain, we are going to have more expensive failures in the future, and if we're afraid, well, we shouldn't be trying to do this.
From NPR, it's How I Built This, a show about innovators, entrepreneurs, idealists, and the stories behind the movements they built.
So Guy Raz interviews all of the different people. You have to choose one of these. You listen to it and try and take it in. And what I would suggest you do is you listen to it more than once. So you can listen to this while you're out running or exercising or hanging out, whatever. But I suggest you listen to it at least twice because you'll get more ideas in your head. As you listen to these episodes, you are going to have to connect them to economics. So you'll choose whether it's a Google slide or a Google site or a Prezi or a Padlet. I don't really care how you present all this information, but you're going to have to present it in one of these forms. Step 1, listen to the podcast, or I guess choose a podcast. Step 2, listen to it. Then you need to explain and summarize the podcast. So who is involved? Where was the company located? When was it created? What market are they trying to tap into? Remember, a market is a place where there's an exchange of goods or services. Who are they trying to hit? What are some of the obstacles the company had to overcome? The risks the company had to take? How did it develop and change over time? So if you listen to a lot of these, you see that none of these guys nailed it the first time. Most of them didn't. Airbnb is on here as well. That's a good one. Uber, DoorDash, those are all on here, so you can listen to those. Anyways, then choose the standards that you would like to improve your grading. So I have this chart, and people have told me this chart's confusing, but I think it makes sense, so I'm going to explain it. If you choose standard 3.1 and standard 3. Or standard, if you choose standard 3.1, then you need to complete everything in this column. So no matter what standard you choose, you need a summary. And then, depending on the standard you choose, you need to choose 3 vocab terms or 4 vocab terms to connect to the podcast. So I have a list of vocabulary terms right here. And essentially, after you've listened and you've heard, oh, this is how this person built Southwest Airlines, for instance, you go to the list of vocab terms and you say, okay, where do I see economics in this podcast? Where do I see needs? Where do I see services? Where do I see scarcity? Where do I see factors of production? And in your presentation, you explain them. And it's the same thing for Standard 3.2, except Standard 3.2 is going to use all of these terms. So where do you see cost-benefit analysis, or markets, or free market economies, or households? Standard 3.3 is going to use these terms. Where do you see demand? Where do you see market demand? Where do you see goods and consumer expectations? And you'll see a lot of those in there. Supply, what do you learn about supply? Quantity supplied, how they change their input cost, etc. Okay, so listen to the podcast, understand the story, and then connect that story to these vocab terms. And what I'm looking for you to do is not just say, Mike's Killer Bread made bread, and bread is goods, but to go into it and say, well, his father was a baker, and his father made basic breads and pastries, but he tapped into a good that people were really into at the time, which is more of like an organic or a whole grain bread, right? His father had a very basic, simple good and was a successful baker, but Mike was able to come up with something that really fit the niche of a particular market, and his good really fit a particular niche, right? That's more of an analysis. So if you can connect well these vocab terms to what you're listening to, boom, you've got a 2.3 or 2.5 or 3. Now, if you want to get that 3.54, then what you need to do is you need to listen to a second How I Built This podcast, and you need to explain the process of creating a business, or explain the differences between the two podcasts you read. Is the process of creating a business the same for everyone? If you're doing standard 3.1, then I want you to talk about how circular flow is different or similar in both of the podcasts you listen to. If you're doing standard 3.2, I want you to look into how markets are similar or different in that process. And if you're doing standard 3.3, I want you to talk about how you see supply and demand differ or are similar. And essentially, what you're going to do is you're going to present all of this in a Prezi or a Google Slide or an iMovie or whatever. I don't really care how you do it. Again, this is optional. So if you want to improve your grades under certain standards, go for it. But the point is that you are choosing an episode and then you are explaining how it connects to the things we've learned so far in economics. Look, here's the list: Spanx, Instagram, Cliff Bar, Airbnb, Southwest Airlines, Patagonia, Melissa and Doug, Warby Parker. I mean, there's Honest Tea. There are all sorts of different things to look into. All right, there you have it. Please let me know if you have any questions.